Thanks for everybody coming tonight. Really appreciate it. I'll do a very quick pair. Like most of these classes, you're going to find I have way more material to deliver than time to do it in. So I'll get going as quickly as possible here. But if you wouldn't mind, please pray with me. Father, we do thank you for today. We thank you for everybody who's able to make it out tonight and learn a little bit more about the world around them and how that relates to you. We thank you so much for making your presence clearly evident through all of the things that we see and experience in life. And as we go through this class, hopefully that will become more clear and that everybody will be feeling like they're supported in their Christian faith and their belief in you. Thank you again for your son. Pray in his name tonight. All right, so last week we looked at what's termed the cosmological argument, a little different than what we're going to go through tonight. It's also known as the argument regarding cause and effect. To kind of recap and summarize that, we basically asked the question, first of all, is the universe eternal? That's either a yes or no question. Well, we use the first and second law of thermodynamics to show that the universe is really winding down. The state of the usable energy that we have available to us is decreasing. This is very well tested over the centuries. We have been looking at these things, and we know that this is the case. That implies that sometime in the past, there was more available energy. There was more available, basically if you think of the clock was wound up and now it's been ticking down. And so that implies that the universe had a beginning. So thus we can come to a conclusion that the universe is not eternal. So with the answer being no, that the universe is not eternal, this means that the universe had to be created. And there's really only two options that are available to us. Either the universe created itself out of nothing, or it was created by something or someone that's external to it and greater than it. Well, we use the principle that nothing always yields nothing to decide that the universe wasn't able to create itself. Absolute nothingness is a very hard concept, and it's really hard for people to understand because it's not within our experience. Wherever we go, there's always something there. But if it's true that absolutely nothing was in the beginning, then it seems quite reasonable to think that there should be absolutely nothing now. However, since there is something now, then we came to the conclusion that something must have always existed. Something has to be eternal. So at that point, we divided everything down that can exist into two categories. Either matter, which includes energy, or mind. We used Dr. Eccles' research, who he did get the Nobel Prize for, to show that, well, the mind is actually more than the functioning of the brain. He said the brain could operate even under just sheer intent without any stimulus from itself internally. And thus, he concluded that, as I said, the mind is more than matter, the mind is more than just the functioning of the brain. And so, with that, we're able to come to the conclusion, or draw the conclusion, that either matter or mind must be eternal. We've already shown that matter cannot be eternal, and we're left with the final answer that mind is what must be eternal, must have existed before the universe, and must be greater than that universe. And of course, for our audience, we simply label that mind as God. That he existed eternally is very different than the universe in terms of matter and energy, and that he brought about the universe. He was the one who actually created it. So, let's assume that this will work. I remember last time my technological skill set was not working. Okay, says it's on. You want to go to the next one there? Well, as the slide comes up, I can continue with the dialogue here, or the narrative, actually. There we go. So what we're going to do now is start looking at the two primary cosmological theories. Now, I'm going to use cosmological here because whether you're talking about creation or whether you're talking about evolution, we are not simply talking about what we find on planet Earth. These theories extend into how did the universe in general come about. And so you can consider them both cosmological type theories. Well, speaking of evolution, evolution centralizes around the idea that everything we have today can be explained through random and strictly naturalistic processes that have been operating over very long periods of times. As I put it in the first class, no gods need apply. All that we see about us was, and I'm going to use air quotes here, created from an unguided, unknowing, non-intelligent set of processes that are still in effect today, but have absolutely no knowledge of your existence or of your importance. That is what evolution is. The creation theory, on the other hand, says that creation emphatically states that the universe and all that we know are an expression of an all-powerful, intelligent God that intentionally brought this about so that he could fellowship with his creation. This God, with intent and with purpose, built a vast environment for us to live in and made us in his image with characteristics and attributes shadowing his own. That we have the ability to think, to reason, to create, to imagine, to dream, to build, to appreciate, love, offer compassion, even sacrifice, and be effective in these types of things is directly due to his own characteristics and his own design. And so these two theories are alike in that they are interpreting what we can see, what we can measure in the world around us. However, these two theories are vastly different in the conclusions and the predictions that they draw. Yes, I typed that all out so I would do it smoothly. So, first, I'd like to touch on some definitions, okay? These are words, fact, theory, hypothesis, law, that, the scientific community really do talk about a lot. There are a lot of words that we've heard, okay? These are things that people, in casual conversation bring up. But most people only have a general feeling on their actual meaning, specifically when you're talking about the scientific type definitions. It's important to know because they're not the same. These, a fact and a theory and a hypothesis are not the same type of things. You can throw the word assumption in here also. It's important, although it's not shown on the graphic, because an assumption too fits into the very framework that we're going to lay with these definitions. So first, let's talk about facts, and that's really small. Sorry about that. A fact is really something that's occurring or has occurred and is observable, all right? It's an event, it's an occurrence, it's a circumstance that has taken place in reality in the world around us. Facts are intended to be verified or falsified, okay? The truthfulness of a fact is based on its verification. They are independent of personal opinions or interpretations. It's not your opinion that something exists, it's whether it really does exist or not. Typically, scientific facts are rigorously tested in order to gain confidence in their validity. We want to know the truthfulness of this fact. Facts, and this is an important part, are statements of what and not of why. It's like, what is it? Not why is it? Okay? So, examples of some of that, of facts are, well, a statement like this. The sun is shining. That's what? An apple will fall to the ground when you drop it. Joe's car is blue. It is currently raining. Facts are the foundation of the knowledge construction and helps us understand the world around us in an objective way. By understanding facts, we start to understand the whats of the world. However, facts may change over time. Today I can go out and see that Joe's car is blue. Tomorrow I'll go outside, Joe's car is still blue. But maybe sometime in the middle of the night, somebody vandalizes Joe's car and spray paints it yellow. I go out tomorrow, Joe's car is no longer blue in reality, and if I state Joe's car is blue, that is still stated as a fact, but it is no longer valid and so is no longer true. A fact does not say why the sun is shining or why that car is blue, only that they are. Now, an assumption is similar to a fact and is treated as a fact in many cases. But typically, assumptions are not validated. You don't know whether they're true or not. You just make the assumption that it could be true. And they're often used as placeholders for when you don't have access to or simply cannot know the truthfulness of a fact. And so you'll find that a lot of, people are going around. It's like, well, Bob, I'll use a different name. Joe went to the store today. Do I really know that? No, but I knew that Joe needed to go get some groceries. I assume that Joe went to the store to get his groceries. He may have just ordered it online and had it delivered. So I'm assuming Joe went to the store when I really I haven't validated that with Joe. I didn't call up and say, Joe, did you go to the store? An invalid fact or an invalid assumption can cause an entire argument to become invalid. That makes perfect sense, right? It's like if you're trying to do an argument regarding something and you're making an assumption about whatever, and it's invalid, it's wrong, then your entire argument just fell apart. Okay, so that's what facts are. So a scientific law, on the other hand, is more about kind of the how of things sometimes. Other times it's more about the relationships of things. And I'll make that a lot bigger for you guys in the next ones. Typically, it's described as a relationship between a set of facts. This is a law, how something works, how these facts interact with each other, and often can be expressed as a mathematical formula. Repeated observations and tests that meet the predicted results of a law allows for the validity of that law to be established. Laws must also be falsified. We'll get to what does falsified mean a few slides from now. But if you can't basically prove it wrong, then laws, you often can't put any stock into that law. Note, theories and laws are not the same thing, okay? They're very different things. Now I have up on the screen there basically Newton's law of gravitation. And it's a relationship between two bodies with masses. Let's just say it's the Earth and the Moon. We put them in outer space, which they already are. Because of gravity, they tend to attract each other. Well, how hard do they attract each other? That's what Newton's law of gravitation expresses. It's that relationship between those two masses and the force that is going to be generated. It's based on how much mass is in each one of those. Of course, the moon and the earth are very massive, so they generate a lot of force. And it's also related to how far apart they are. Further apart they are, the less force that they tend to attract each other with. Very similar to magnets. You all have played with magnets, and if you put the two magnets very close together, they pull on each other much harder than if you have them further apart. And if you have really big magnets, they generate a lot more force than little tiny magnets. So very similar types of laws there, and the relationships. The facts that we're dealing with is a massive body, the Earth, a massive body, the moon, a measurable distance between those two bodies, and those are the facts, and the law creates the relationship based on those facts. So now we come to kind of the definition of a theory. And a theory is a set of ideas or principles or hypotheses that, and it doesn't print very well, explains a particular phenomenon or aspect of the world. A scientific theory is a framework to describe the why that a set of facts and laws exist, okay? A theory is based on observations. These are the facts, data, experiments, some assumptions in order to support its validity. Any serious theory must have the property of being falsifiable, all right? And because of that, if you can't prove the theory wrong, then you have to really wonder about it a little bit. Theories are fundamental for understanding and predicting natural phenomena. That's another property of theories. You should be able to take the theory and predict something that either you don't know now or could know. But theories are often revised, modified, or replaced as new evidences accumulate. So let me go back to Newton's law of gravity. We saw that. You could restate that as a theory. You could say Newton's theory of gravity, of why two bodies attract each other. Well, it turns out that was very good. Newton's laws around gravitation did a wonderful job of describing why we have gravity for the very longest times, several centuries. But Einstein, in the early part of the 20th century there, developed the theory of relativity, which also involves gravity, and his theory was much better. So now we're taking Newton's laws and we're extending it with the theory of relativity, and it basically did a better job of predicting things, of describing the world around us. And so these two theories, although Newton's was not wrong, Einstein's was just better at it, specifically as we got better at measuring things and able to know how things really react out in the real world. So a well-established theory is supported by solid evidence, has a high degree of confidence in its truthfulness or its validity. Solid theories often lead to predictions that cannot be tested today. And we're going to see this in a future class about certain things. But one of the things that you guys probably remember not too long ago, it's been a few years, was the talk around the Higgs boson. And this was in the news, and the way they tend to do things, they called it the God particle, okay? That was actually predicted and proposed way back in 1964. We had absolutely no way to test for it. The mathematics and the theory behind those mathematics predicted that the Higgs boson should exist, and we needed to do some refinement in our technology and advances in our technology in order to be able to actually detect it. Well, that's exactly why they built the Large Hadron Collider. Maybe you've heard of that, maybe you haven't. It's over in Geneva, Switzerland. It's the most complicated machine ever built and one of the most costly at I don't know, several $100 billion. But what it is a particle accelerator, and the idea is to shoot particles at each other at near the velocity of the speed of light, and then make them explode. Above the theory there, you see the little squigglies. That's actually a picture of particles blowing up and then the subparticles flying away and doing weird stuff. So the thing is that oftentimes a good theory is going to predict something that we cannot validate now, but should be able to validate sometime in the future. Now, there's a popular perception about theories that it's something less than a law, okay? It's like, if you've got a theory, eventually it's going to grow up and it's going to be a law at that time. Actually, they're very, very different things. They're not just, apples and oranges. They're more like zebras and comets in what they're all about. So theories don't grow up to be laws. Instead, theories stand on their own. They incorporate laws, they incorporate facts, and they intend to try to explain the why of something rather the what or the relationships between those whats. Finally, hypothesis. A hypothesis is really kind of a starting point for scientists. It can be as simple as an idea. It's like, hey, I think such and such will happen if we do this. Or it could be more structure, a more formally stated proposition that's really ready for testing. That's what you would find a hypothesis to be in the scientific community, not just a bunch of musing about things that could happen. They're not going to call those hypotheses yet. And so you need at least one, if not more, hypotheses to be the starting point for developing theories, because that's where the ideas get rolling about why does something happen. All right, so it's important to recognize that these terms are used casually in society. And when they do that, it can lead people to the wrong perceptions. So for instance, a casual use of one of these is, I could say, hey, Sally Sue is absolutely the craziest person on the planet. And that's just a fact. Well, okay, well, what's a fact? Well, it's something that's measurable. You should be able to see it repeated. Did I really go out there and measure all the different people on the planet and find out that Sally Sue is the craziest person of all 8 billion people? Probably not, okay? But as you can see, those euphemistic type phrases can mislead you on what a fact really is. Or here's another one. Hey, I heard eating spinach makes you stronger. And you might say, well, yeah, that's the theory. Is that really a theory? Is that a framework for interpreting the world around us to describe why something happens? No, it's really just a hypothesis. It's just like an idea that's out there. So when these terms are used so casually, really society can be given the wrong impression. And so I took our friend Mr. Thomas Hayden from the first class in his statement that he made in one of his articles that he wrote, because he's a prolific author, and it says, evolution, is an everyday phenomenon, a fundamental fact of biology, as real as hunger and unavoidable as death. Well, if you actually rewrite that, and I'll read it from here because the yellow doesn't print on my printer, you would replace evolution here with the general theory of biological evolution, which is a framework we use to interpret the facts and relationships we see in nature and to make predictions, is an everyday phenomenon. No, it's a framework. It's a set of ideas and how to do that. It's a fundamental fact. Well, it incorporates facts, but it's not a fact. Fact of biology, as real as hunger and unavoidable as death. See, by casually using these terms, which he did, his intent was to establish the credibility of evolution as something that the general populace would would look at and say, oh, well, here's an authoritarian telling me evolution is a fact. Who am I to argue that? Well, evolution is not a fact at all. By misusing these terms, people can be misled. Okay, I promised you falsification. So what is this? Well, the principle of falsification was developed by Karl Popper. He had a book that he wrote called The Logic of Scientific Discovery, and it was put out in 1934. So this idea has been around a lot, and it's actually a very good idea. That's why it's maintained its own here. But basically in that book, Popper argued that a scientific theory or hypothesis is falsifiable if it can logically be contradicted by an empirical test. An empirical test means a test that you can do to it, okay? And which can at least potentially be executed using existing technologies. So he was saying, hey, if we're going to falsify this thing, it has to be something we can do in the current, not necessarily be thinking too far down into the future. The main purpose of falsifiability is to make the scientific theory testable and predictive. If you look at the little picture up there, what it says on the right there is what science knows is our collection of tested and not falsified hypotheses. And so you've got this funnel going into this test machine here where a bunch of hypotheses and ultimately theories go into that. And you kick out the ones that are false and you kick out the other ones that are not false. And that collection of not false hypotheses are basically your truthful, verifiable, ideas that the world knows about. To do this, we have to be able to devise a test to disprove a statement. So I talked about Joe's car being blue. My test is I walk out the front door and look at Joe's car sitting on the street outside. If it's blue, that lets me say that statement is still, valid. If on the other hand, at some point in the future, someday I walk out there and that car is yellow because he was vandalized, then immediately I have falsified my statement, and at that point, that is a no longer valid statement. That's exactly what has to happen to all of these theories, to all of these facts, to all of these laws, is they are constantly being tested in order to see if there's some obscure corner case that you might find, that eventually pops up and it says, oh, this one time, this law is wrong. It is no longer valid. At that point, then you have to go back and you have to rework your ideas on that. Unfalsified statements can be used in a theory, but they really should be stated as an assumption, because that's what an assumption is. It's like it's an idea that you don't know truly if it's true or false, or if it's valid or not, and yet you want to use it as an input into your theory or into a hypothesis or things like that. So, when we look at the theory of creation and we look at the theory of evolution, well, both of these, and kind of compare them, both of these are frameworks that attempt to explain the why and the how of what we find in the universe. Both include facts and laws that we can see and that we can test. Both have built-in assumptions and hypotheses. Both provide predictions of what we should find. Both theories have statements that are falsifiable. It means that we can test them and see if they are true or not. Both theories have statements that can't be falsified. So what are some of those? Because I thought it would be a good point to say, what are some of the things that we just can't test in either of these theories? Well, one-time events are not, by definition, not falsifiable. You have to be able to go back and repeatedly run tests on your idea. Because there may be some point in the future where your expected outcome is different than what you have been seeing in the past. So if it's only a one-time event, you can't test it anyway because it's in the past, but you don't have that repeatability aspect to it. The act of creation is a one-time event. God says he was done on the seventh day. It is not, to our knowledge, occurring anymore. Therefore, within the creation theory, the fact that God created, being a one-time event, is unfalsifiable. We weren't there, we didn't know, we didn't see it, and we can't test it now. Hence why Paul says we have to walk by faith sometimes and not exactly by sight. Another thing that is unfalsifiable are events or changes that take place over hundreds of human generations. This is speaking directly, of course, to the evolutionary theory, where it takes millions and billions of years to get something done. That is not falsifiable because no single human being or no single effort put on by multiple generations of human beings can actually test that. And so even though you will hear scientists say, oh no, we're testing evolution all the time, they are not testing the duration of time for evolution to occur naturally in its natural environment. They're creating an artificial environment where they can see these changes perhaps occurring at a much more rapid pace within their lifetime or even within days, weeks, or months. But that is not the same test as what you would find in nature according to their theory. You cannot test events that leave no physical evidence. Kind of the leave no trace thing. When you go camping, it's like, was somebody here or not? Or a tree falling in the woods. You have all heard that. If a tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound? Well, we assume it makes a sound if we're not there to monitor it. But with nobody there to actually test it, we don't know for sure. If there is some idea or concept that we absolutely have no way of devising a test to see if it's false, that also would create a situation where it's unfalsifiable. Okay. Both these theories have issues when it comes to unfalsifiable statements. And because of that, you have to, really weigh what kind of impact does that mean to the theory as a whole. Okay, so let's go on here. So we're going to look at the creation theory. We are going to get through a few of these days, but not everything, which is what I anticipated. The creation theory is all about God creating the universe. This is a literal reading of the Genesis account, day 1 to day 6. You guys are very familiar with this, and so we will probably go through this somewhat rapidly. Now, remember, a theory is not a bad thing. A theory is not a substandard thing. The general perception, I think, of the populace is, well, it's a theory, it's not a real law, it's not a real fact, or something like that. When in fact, no, a theory is a thing that stands on its own. And it's that framework of explaining why things exist. So, I'm going to go ahead and read the account, and then I'm going to read what we can predict from it. So, creation day 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was a formless and desolate emptiness, and darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the waters. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there is evening, and there is morning, one day. Okay. Theories should allow you to predict things that could be tested. All right, so what can we predict from this? Or at least what can we make some assumptions on that we should be able to know? Well, from this, we understand that the earth was featureless. When it talks about formless and desolate emptiness, that does not mean a wasteland like you might see after a war, okay? The actual meaning out of the Hebrew is that it's just featureless. You know, it probably, because there was waters, looked like a gigantic water ball, okay? You look at planet Earth, it's got continents and oceans, just think of it as one big ocean. From here, we can assume or we can predict that space and time must have been created, okay? That he created the heavens and the earth. Part of that was to create what we understand as three-dimensional space and time, as per verse 1. There was water. There was the primordial, or the featureless, I'll use that word instead, featureless earth. So matter, the water, and probably, you know, the rocks underneath that weren't visible, and energy, the light, had their beginning. We basically can say that matter and energy had their beginning here. Not necessarily all the matter and all the energy were created at this point, but at least they had their beginning here. The laws of physics, the laws of chemistry, the laws of causality had to be established, okay? There could have been waves in the ocean. So the laws of physics and of gravity were in place. Water is, you know, hydrogen dioxide. Don't drink that stuff. It's really bad for you. But water is H2O. Those atoms are clumped together. They're held together by the atomic forces. So 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. Those parts of physics were already established and working. God created a temporary light source. We don't know what that was. It could be his own essence shining. But he created a light source so that he could eventually say, well, this is going to be what day is and what night is. Because of the fact that he wanted to define those days, he must have spun the earth up. If it was sitting still, not rotating, at least at this point, we can assume that he had to start it rotating. And the reason for that was because that's how we understand a day and a night. It's the spinning of the earth as we face the sun and face away from the sun. In addition, he probably spun up the inner core of the earth, which is where our magnetic field would have been is generated from, and so that the earth at that time then had a magnetic field, part of the spinning up process. It's very likely because of when the stars were created, day 4, that God set the boundaries of the universe in place. He talked about the expanse at that point. And so thus, however big the universe is, which we haven't found the edge of it, he set that in place in order to create and denote the heavens. So from these verses, these are the types of things, and I saw him, he's going to go push that button like right now. These are the things that we can predict and maybe even try to test against in terms of the creation theory. And so we will halt right there. I haven't had people ask questions in the past, but now you have like 30 seconds. So fantastic.